workforce, everything is changing very rapidly for us. So let me quickly start introducing our panelists who are highly accomplished and successful people. Our first panelist is a very sporty person who has been doing cross-country running and also very active in social work in his community. He has interest in jazz and has education in marketing that he uses to his fullest in his current responsibility as CEO of InvestKL. His current role is to bring as much global investment into Malaysia as possible, and he has been doing a fantastic job, and I am a witness to that because I had been his customer. I am his customer rather. He's based out of Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I would like to briefly explain about InvestKL. So InvestKL has been mandated by government of Malaysia to attract large global multinational companies to establish their regional business, innovation and talent hubs in Greater Kuala Lumpur, providing a gateway for companies to grow in their business in Asia. Welcome, Mr. Muhammad Azmi. All right.
Thank you.
So, perfect. So I'll go to our second panelist. Our second panelist is an academician by heart and is a young and accomplished in doing very few, something very few can imagine. So when I say young, I know all of us look very young here, but then try to spot the youngest of us. All right. So he is expert in demolition. So he's a demolition expert, someone who ensures that the old gets removed to pave way for the new thing to come. After completing his engineering in 1998, he completed his PhD in 2003 in United Kingdom. He teaches and also does his duty as Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research and Innovation at University Malaysia, Kelantan, apart from being an active demolition consultant. Prior to his role, he was director in the Department of Higher Education in Malaysia. Welcome, Professor Dr. Arham Abdullah.
Thank you. Hello. Hi.
All right, we move to our next panelist. Our next panelist is an accomplished global speaker, consultant, and an executive coach. Her clients spread across 20 countries. And that was one of the reasons she has widely traveled, probably more than 35 countries. She lived in Qatar for 8 years, where she was responsible for a large leadership development project. She has been associated with Global Entrepreneurship Network, also known as GEN, for more than 10 years and co-founded GEN UK, where she serves as executive director. She lives in Ware in Hertfordshire, United Kingdom. Welcome, Elaine, to our webinar.
Thank you.
Just to put a word, her full name is Elaine Gold. Gold is glittering as gold, so it's very easy to remember, right? So, and now we move on to our last panelist. So I'm pretty sure there is no surprise who is the last panelist. Our last panelist is a traveler by nature and a startup guru by heart, who advocates creating sustainable businesses and truly believes that the adventure starts when there is no adventure anymore. So that's an interesting start. Now, let us hold our hearts, the number of countries he has traveled. He has lived in and traveled to over 80 countries across every continent and is still not finished. And pretty young, I can see that clearly. So probably he will cover out 203 countries. From Tibet to Greenland, there is almost nowhere he hasn't visited. In the process, he has learned a lot about privilege, his spiritual path, and became very passionate about creating a lasting impact. Now, there had been a very difficult phase of his life in 2014 when he was detected a brain tumor. And it was a very severe state when he decided to heal himself by unique and spiritual direction rather than to choose the suffer and pain of traditional medicine. I will not explain too much here about it, but he is absolutely fit. And you can find a lot of videos that cover his experience that transformed him. It's very inspiring. So how someone without using medicine can cure his brain tumor. And God forbid, we don't want that situation to happen. But then fighting it out is a big deal. He currently works on several amazing projects and has been directly involved in creating more than 10 companies in the last 10 years. He's driven by the vision to help as many people as possible in combination with entrepreneurship. He supports projects in Guatemala, Myanmar, and Brazil. He leads the Swiss chapter of Global Entrepreneurship Network, where his highest motivation is to connect the Swiss entrepreneur scene with global peers. He holds a business IT degree in MBA from University of Southern Queensland, as well as an executive MBA. When he does not travel, he stays at his home in Lugano in Switzerland. Well, I still wonder why he has to travel so much when he lives in the most beautiful place on the earth, So that is always a contradiction, but yes, Marcel, welcome to you to this webinar. So meet Marcel Gasser, and I would rather start with him only with the first question, all right? So we all know COVID has become the most discussed topic in the world. Probably people will remember BC as before COVID and AC is after COVID kind of a scenario. Probably before Christ, after Christ will vanish and replace there. So we understand, the professional way of working and the way we conduct ourselves is changing. So my question to you, Marcel, you are the most traveled person in the group and has been deeply connected to the startup ecosystem, as well as global economies. You have been a speaker in many forums and you are aware of the changes COVID has brought in our lives. What do you see as a permanent impact of COVID in our professional way of working in the job market globally?
Hi, everybody, and thanks a lot for the introduction. Yes, as you said, I've traveled a lot, and first of all, for me was kind of, would say, a big personal change that, of course, I can't travel that freely, and the impact on the job market I see, or what I have experienced with various conversations since lockdown or Corona, there is a little cat around, was that the job market will get extra boosted online. It's incredible. And I mean, I'm a digital nomad since kind of 5 years. I've been traveling around, working and living on the go. So I know what it means to be completely online business or online focus, but I could never imagine how quickly the transition or the pace of transformation towards online will be done with Corona. So as you said before, this COVID can be a huge opportunity. I see more opportunities when it comes to job market, or I don't want to call it globalization, but I would say it's a huge opportunities also for the countries in Asia, because you have highly talented people. And we also hear it from InvestKL or our friends in Kuala Lumpur that the talent availability and the skills of talent is huge. And now with the online opportunities, global access has never been easier, that you can work internationally without having this barrier of maybe moving to other countries or visa restriction, etc. So I'm very optimistic in that perspective. And of course, there is this human factor. That's also what we share in common, Alok and myself, is to understand the people better. And there I have some, let's say, we need to be mindful of how does this impact the people of, let's say, if they have home office all the time, how does it interact with our social abilities of missing this social human interaction? So I think there is a human factor beside of these technology opportunities, which we should be mindful of. And that's my first thought on this question.
All right. So, Elaine, I'll come to you to understand your viewpoint. UK has been one of the most affected in this pandemic. At one point of time, you're wondering what's going to happen there. Probably it's much better. So I just, do you want to add to these change, what Marcel has spelled out from your experience in the last few months on impact of COVID on the way of jobs and workplaces and the transformation you see?
Yeah, I think certainly I'd echo what Marcel was saying about the pace of change. what's happened post-COVID isn't that we've suddenly been transported to a completely different world. We are seeing things that were there and bubbling under, changes in people working distantly, working from home, those sorts of things, which have been advocated for many years, being accelerated. So that's one of the big things that we've seen. In the UK, we're trying to open up a lot more. So there are more people going back to the workplace, but many people feeling nervous about that. And so, again, as Marcel was saying, we need to reflect on the social impact of isolation. People are always going to want to come back together again in order to spark ideas off one another and just get that sort of the well-being of being in the company of other people. So I think that will continue, but I think offices themselves will change a lot. For us in terms of work, a big concern, and I'm sure it will be true of many countries, is a number of companies are failing during this period. So there's going to be a huge amount of redundancies that's always coming through. And what's predicted in the UK is that the demographic that's probably going to be hardest hit are the young. So for us as Gen UK, focusing on entrepreneurship, we're beginning to say, well, what can we do to help and support particularly the young people who might move into and see entrepreneurship and startups as a kind of necessity option moving forward. Now, as you mentioned, look, I lived and worked in the Middle East for many years, and you see a lot of young necessity entrepreneurs in the Middle East region, and I think that's probably true in Africa, we've seen there. So what can we in the UK learn from those other countries who have had this issue to focus on before? So interesting times, and I think we're all agreed that there's opportunities there and opportunities for positive change in all of these areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Without a challenge, there is no opportunity. And when there is an opportunity, good things do happen. And in our own education, in our Indian culture, we have a God whose job is to just destroy. That's where Dr. Arham, I was kind of getting connected. He's a demolition expert, and that's why that God is also our demolition expert. He demolishes. Why? Because a new thing has to be created. And we talk about demolition, it doesn't mean only building. Here now, the old and established way of doing things are now getting demolished because of COVID. And probably better ways would come, which will create much more better opportunities, better health, lesser pollution, and whatnot. So I will move on to Mr. Azmi. Because Malaysia is a very upcoming. When I say upcoming, when in India we only see two cities in the region. It is Singapore and Kuala Lumpur. That's what we say. They're the two great cities, great places where we would like to go establish, do business. So I just want to understand, that remote and work from home are becoming buzzwords. How do you see Malaysians changing their way of working a global community can take a note of in terms of unique and great way? Because this is probably, and I said that Asia is going to be, this century is belonging to Asian. So what do you see the unique and great way, Malaysians are doing or can do in this difficult time?
Sure. To give a perspective of what Malaysia went through, we initiated our Movement Control Order, MCO, on 18th of March 2020. So that's about 3-4 months ago. But I'd like to share one interesting fact. Today, 23rd of July, I am now on my 80th day in office because we had a soft start, stepping out carefully and cautiously post-COVID on the 4th of May. I'm happy to say that we took very clear steps, observing the SOPs as well as practicing all the suggested physical distancing and so on. And I'm happy to see that the team, especially in InvestKL and generally in Malaysia, have adopted to all these practices, and we are happy with where we are today. Clearly, we took it one step at a time. The first week of 4th of May is probably a 30% workforce, moving on 50% and so on. And by today, we are up to about 90% workforce. Yeah, and that's important because everyone took the opportunity to experience and to do their own risk assessment. And this is very important. The risk in commuting to the office and back, the risk in going for lunch, in getting coffee downstairs, those kind of things, and even taking the lift or the elevator, those basic stuff that we need to not just be aware of, but we need to practice. So this is where we've seen that with the COVID situation, we have taken little baby steps to come out of the pandemic. Clearly, from the MCO or the control order from the March 18, one thing that was clear, a number of companies, especially I must say foreign global companies as well as multinationals, were quickly able to adapt to the working from home situation. And this is where it's important for us as government to ensure that we facilitate this and at the same time identify all the necessary essential goods and services that needs to be given approval to operate. And that's very important. Why working from home is possible, and I see two factors here that we have experienced in Malaysia. The maturity of the workforce, that is probably sometimes questioned all around the world, and that's probably sometimes questions in terms of young people, what's their commitment and so on, but we have seen a good maturity of the workforce. The robust infrastructure, clearly broadband connectivity and all other activities, that was strong and proven as well, which allowed the working from home to happen quite seamlessly in Kuala Lumpur and Malaysia. When we have in Malaysia alone, we have about 11 million labor force, workforce. Yeah. On top of that, perhaps you've got another 7 million students in schools, postgraduates, undergraduates. They are doing online learning. So in general, heavy usage of the internet for about up to 18 million people at any time, and that was made possible because we took the steps to really focus on building all this infrastructure. Clearly, with COVID as well, the digitalization experience have been accelerated, and I'm sure all countries even are looking at what would they want to do next if we hit another pandemic, for that matter, and so on. So it's always that part of the activity. One thing that I must give credit to is the frontliners, not even in Malaysia, but all around the world. They have really played their role, and we as citizens, as the working force, would have to also play our role in doing the physical distancing, observing the SOPs, wearing our face masks. There's a simple fact like that in public places, for example. And these are some of the steps that we have seen. We are experiencing it, and we are happy with the progress that we are doing with regards to that. And clearly across Southeast Asia, probably this will be the first region to step out of the COVID situation, with each countries within the Southeast Asia supporting each other.
That's a really positive thing, because what I heard from my team in Malaysia, when they said that they are going to office, I said, what? How can you go to office? Is it still okay? No, we are not going to office, and everything is taken care. So my heart was pounding that, oh my God, what would happen if somebody would fall sick? But then there are two things which stood out very strongly. It is the awareness of the public, that is to follow the rules and do things what is mandated. And secondly, the awareness of the government to stand by their public, to see that we are there to help. And when we spoke about the MCO, I was very closely watching that. It had been done in a very planned and organized way, and I think probably Malaysia would be the first country to come out of it, and it's already coming out. So really, congratulations to you all for doing that good work and creating an example for other countries to follow. Maybe India, we will have still long way to go, but still things are not fading off. Probably another couple of more months. So I'll move to the second part of this discussion, where we'll discuss more about the foundation stone, of the education, the startup ecosystem, which typically creates the jobs and create job-ready people. And for that, I think who's the best person other than Professor Arham to start that? And Professor, I would like to ask you, a simple question. Any society can only reap the benefit from the foundation they have created. So the great education system has been the key driver for all the, the best of the economies of the world, be it US, Europe, and even India. You talk about, real good education system. And that has been the key driver for all kind of growth these countries have seen. However, COVID seems to be challenging the basic premise, what we expected, right from going to office, working 9 to 5, having a settled life, or having a classroom where there is a teacher and teaching. So everything has got changed. So what are your views on creating a changed and good education system that will help Malaysia cope up with the future needs in a meaningful employment, and also help country to stand out in front of the world as one of the leaders, where now it's like, and I said, it is the century of Asia. So how can Malaysia take benefit of it through this education? So your views, please. Your speaker is mute, Professor, so if you can just unmute it. Can you unmute? Sorry.
Yeah, thanks
yeah.
for the question. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So for your information also, the school just started yesterday, or the primary and secondary school just started yesterday. And for our university student, we probably will start in October. They will come back to the universities partly, and mostly for time being, we are doing teaching and learning, online teaching and learning. And based on the question, again, a very good evening to all the panels and audience for the webinar on this very interesting topic, what we call transforming the future of work and workforce. And it was an honor for me to be invited by InvestKL to be one of the panel. Thanks InvestKL, thanks Encik Azmi. I've been working with InvestKL for the past, I think, 4 or 5 years, engaging, especially focusing on talent development, where we have a program called Global Talent Program between InvestKL and also Ministry of Higher Education last time. And when looking at this title given to me as a panel, straight away it bring my memories back to the year 2018, where I was involved as one of the writer for the book called Framing Malaysia Higher Education 4.0, Future-Proof Talent, right? And in today's discussion, I will highlight several points in the book because it's really related to the topics, and share some of my experience in handling graduate employment for the past 5 years. When I was tasked as a director for Industry Relations Division at the Ministry. And this book can be served as a guide for public universities and private institutions in meeting the demand of 4IR. And for this instance, we are facing a COVID-19 pandemic. Luckily, we have prepared it since 2018, and we are moving toward that direction based on all the objective of the vision and mission of the ministry. And then it was last time developed through several phases of collaborative and consultative process with various stakeholders, and it referred to the Malaysia Education Blueprint 2015 to 2025 on higher education, and one initiative by the ministry called Redesigning Malaysia Higher Education, which are aligned with the mission and vision of the ministries. And I will share my views on creating change and good education system that will help Malaysia to cope with future needs in meaningful employment, also help the country stand out in the front of the world, hopefully, right? And over the years, when we look at the 4IR movement, so in higher education also we have transformed from Malaysia higher education 1.0 to higher education 4.0, right? In higher education 1.0 is more centered on the teachers as the source of knowledge by using chalk and talk teaching method. And then we are moving towards higher education 2.0, where establish the utilization of basic technology practice in the classroom and feature student as receptacles of information, right? And then on higher education 3.0, it encouraged dynamic teaching approach by requiring students exploration of real world problems and collaboration on social learning platform. And now we are moving toward the fourth stage, which is higher education 4.0, which promotes student diversification of roles as curators of knowledge, content producer, for example, connection makers, and the web as the open global curriculum and educators as the resource guide, right? And in Malaysia, during the COVID-19 movement control order, for example, all teaching and learning at my institute, Universiti Malaysia Kelantan, we are located at East Coast of Malaysia, is conducted virtually. Even the examination and assessment was conducted online, right? So these are the new norm, I believe, for Malaysia or even the world. And in Malaysia Higher Education 4.0, emphasize what we call HOTS, higher order thinking skills, than compared to the lower order thinking skill. The cognitive domain drives the goal of learning process, where learners are expected to acquire new skills, knowledge, and attitude, as well as construct their own new knowledge. Learners should actively contextualize and produce data instead of only acquiring it. Now we're looking at big data, data analytics, and so on. They need to be able also to generate knowledge based on personal experience and environmental participation. So these are some of the transformation that move from higher education 1.0 to higher education 4.0, right? And in additional, from my opinion on this topic, it is imperative that humanistic competencies such as emotional intelligence, mindfulness, empathy, and social responsibility be nurtured at all learning stages, not only on the technical part, but also the soft side of the human side. And this competency, which differentiate humans and robots or AI, now we're talking about 4th Industrial Revolution, right? It will ensure the sustainability and continuity of humankind. Despite technological advancement in machine learning, deep learning, robotics, AI, are devoid from ethics and value. These are the difference between we as humans and the robots. And we believe that we need to emphasize on these values. Thus, value-driven education is crucial to produce balanced graduates who will subsequently become ethical members of the society. Accordingly, Ministry of Higher Education also stressed the development of moral values, strong national identity, cultural and civilizational literacy, self-awareness, and also interpersonal skills. Its ultimate goal is to develop students with the ability to contribute to the Malaysian society and also actively participate in the global arena. And nowadays, the most critical issues resulting from the COVID-19 is the issues of unemployment and also displacement of jobs. So how we need to prepare our students to face these big challenges. I believe it's not only in Malaysia, but also throughout the world. And by looking at it, I managed to do some search. In 2016-17, study by Oxford Martin School projected that threat of jobs loss among developing countries to be 55% to 85%, while United Nations agency disclosed that 2/3 of jobs in developing countries might be at risk because of the automation, new technologies coming in, robotics, and so on. And then in additional, I can also find McKinsey Global Institute reported that 49% of present work activities can be automated, and this represented 15.8 billion in wages and 1.1 billion jobs globally. So we are facing all these challenges, and I believe, especially in Malaysia, based on the book or the strategic plan that we prepared, Malaysia graduate, especially Malaysia graduate, will have to adapt quickly and acquire digital focus skill, which will determine their future marketability. And then, for example, again, in 2018, Uber has embarked in testing driverless car, and eventually driverless Uber will be providing urban transportation. Again, automation enhanced by digital technology and human cognitive function will be a global trend, which may cause 4 to 5 million truck and taxi drivers to lose their jobs in US alone. This is based on the study. And this example demonstrates that the 4IR has created new digital order, a new norm, through a host of platforms, which may alter social, economic, and also political landscape. Nation, I believe, cannot afford to ignore such global development in preparing our workforce for the future of work. And last but not least, for this section, I believe Malaysia education institution must play their role in producing future-proof graduates, tailored and prepared for the immersive education, which combine the virtual worlds, simulators, learning games, sophisticated digital media, and in addition, learning and teaching must incorporate 21st century learning skill in line with our education blueprint, which include collaboration, digital literacy, critical thinking, problem solving, and help students to thrive in the 4IR and necessities for the future-proof graduates. I believe I will stop here.
So, it was a very, very insightful update which you had given. And I had been noting down a few of the things. For example, education's 1.0, 1.0 to education 4.2, and how systematically when you change, but at the same time you have a huge challenge because of automation for jobs. And then the COVID comes, it adds to this trouble. But then for sure there will be something, and that's where your HOTS came, higher order thinking and skills, which no machine can take over from human beings, at least in the near future. That's what I'm pretty sure about it. So yes, there is a huge challenge, and your insights and your systematic way of explaining had been really marvelous. Good knowledge to me also, and I have been taking some notes. So that automatically forms the next question, which I'll come to Elaine. Elaine, you have been with the people and consulting, understand the people very well. The education, right now the education system, what has been, say in India, had been all about a class teacher teaching the school. They're always in the best of the corporates. And students who need the best teachers are left out to fend for themselves. That's why when they go out, the first thing what they do is train me once again. So they go to college, learn something, they go back to company, they unlearn back again. And then they learn back in the companies from their new teachers who are managers. Now, the minimum cost, that's the wish. So on to you, Elaine.
Well, this is a subject that I feel very passionate about, the whole of education. Not only have I, as you say, a little bit sort of been working in consultancy in this area, but I've also worked within higher education, particularly with students who are probably about 18 to 20 years old, looking at vocational education. And I'm very passionate about the whole area. And for many, many years, I felt very frustrated because, as the professor was saying, education for many, many countries has been very much stuck, probably your 2.0, not even going beyond that. And I am, you know, I'm of a certain age where I remember working in the even in the 1980s and the 1990s, when we were talking about the importance of 21st century skills. And for me, it's been so frustrating that taking those 21st century skills and seeing how they could be developed at all ages, and particularly from a very young age. And I think that's crucially important in education. And your higher order thinking skills are exactly that, aren't they? They are the 21st century skills being rounded. So I've been frustrated for a long time that education and methods of education haven't changed since the 19th century. We began to see MOOCs, etc., and people working distantly beginning to emerge. But as we've all been saying, what COVID has done is really accelerate that and make it much more immediate now. So, I mean, it sounds like the book, I'm very interested to read your book to see how that moves forward. I think you've got all of the pieces in place there. But what I would encourage any government to do in terms of education is to really look at where we start at a very early age. How can we really embed these higher order thinking skills at the very young age? And sadly for us in the UK, what COVID has highlighted as is the split in terms of opportunity. You know, those of the poorer class who do not have access to technology, and schools have shut. They're trying to continue their education, but if you've got one small tablet or even one smartphone between two parents and 3 or 4 or 5 kids, it's very difficult to take that learning forward. So I think the equality of opportunity in terms of access to technology is critical, and that needs planning. And it is a topic I'm passionate about, so I'll round up. But I think we've talked about the whole person. And I think, again, another opportunity moving forward is those primary school classrooms. How can we make the environments more healthy? And Marcel will know about the whole forest school movement in Europe that began to be thinking about in the UK too. What's our physical environment like in which we learn and our young people learn and grow? And that's true even of the students. So whereas sort of the 18, 20-year-olds can work very maturely, as we were talking about before, distantly, they're still going to need to come together. So what's the physical environment like for that to happen? And again, in terms of access to technology, the bandwidth, etc., of the internet connections needs to be really improved in all the countries to make it easier and more equitable. I'll stop there.
So, right. And, you know, I was like thinking in parallel. There was a time in India where students would not get education because there was no access to schools. And the only parents would somehow teach them, and then the dropout used to happen. But there was a research which happened, which saw, you know, which was done, you know, it's something which I want to put up here. In Delhi, there was a research which was done about the grasping and understanding power of interested versus not interested. Okay. So there was a, you know, IT, technology education team, which used to teach students how to write programming codes and like that. And the whole classroom was set up in a very underprivileged society. And there was a window which was kept open where a lot of small kids would just keep peeping in and keep listening to the professors or teachers who were teaching. And after 2-3 months, some of these you know, children who continued to peep in the window, they were called in, and they were given a test along with those students who were given a full-time training. And to the surprise, they scored better. Right. So it is like, how is it possible that we never trained them? We never even taught them. They were just kind of peeping in. There were no practical lessons. but it was just out of sheer interest. This is where, you know, these students, even when they were not trained and learned, they became highly learned. And somewhere this thing comes to same professor, you know, input, where we say it is understanding the psychology. It's about understanding the people. It is knowing the person. It is also equally important, because when we are moving into mechanization and automation and all of that, somewhere we should not be leaving the human being behind. And probably I learned a lot in Finland also, you know, how they do. But you know, I would put question to Marcel. He's one of the pioneers there, and he keeps talking to me on and off, telling, you know, how the education system should happen. You know, so I would say, I would like you to challenge Marcel and establish the school, the established school of thoughts on formal education, and throw light on how experiential learning can be the answer to the faster and better education system. You know, that's something which we all have tried.
I really love what everybody has been sharing so far, and I would love to go a little bit into where we are coming from, because in the Industrial Revolution, or after Industrial Revolution, we have been highly educated, as we heard, by 1.0, and I would say it's IQ, everything on IQ, training IQ, etc. And then from 20th century, we hear this EQ, the emotional abilities, intelligence, and etc. And I think for these centuries, it already started earlier, but now with Corona, it's like, it's all about adaptability. How can we teach and educate and inspire people to being adaptable, whatever, because the ever changing, nature is constant change. Even we as human beings, we are pure change from when we have been born and until we pass away. So this adaptability is so needed, and that's the fact why I love the Corona, the positive aspects of Corona, because it can be a huge opportunity if we want to. We can't change it. We have to accept somehow and adapt to the new kind of reality. And from the beginning, I always said COVID-19 is a huge trust and freedom issue, because this trust and freedom, it's starting from government. When is the right moment to open up again? It starts from the population or the society. Do we trust in the measurements, in the restriction governments are taking? Is it too soft, too harsh, whatever? And when it comes to education, I think this trust is also very crucial, that we trust in those new, let's say, students, that they find the subjects, what we heard earlier, that this 4.0 I love, when we curate knowledge, because the most you learn when you start to teach yourself. It's scientifically proven that once you start to teach a subject, it's the most efficient in learning. And I think with all the online tools and this new reality, this is a perfect breathing ground. And for universities or the education sector in general, without COVID, I would be very pessimistic. Normal university, even elite university, they already could see that people are hardly being attractive, because these millennia and generation Y and Z, they look for something else. And I also loved what Elaine said about these necessity entrepreneurs, because this is also coming from what is the motivation. And I love to ask people, what is your motivation? And I think this new reality also, when we come back to this human factor we have been talking about, understanding the motivation, the happiness, the intrinsic values we heard, it better fits the lifestyle. I wrote down so the freelance gig economy, learning on demand, it's unstoppable. This is already here, and with this COVID, it's so much boosted, we can't stop it. And learning on demand, it's much more in a positive way also coherent with my lifestyle, if I know what is my motivation and lifestyle, because maybe I focus on family in the morning and I learn in afternoon, evenings. I learn at night if I'm a night person, whatever. I do it already since 5 years. I'm working when I feel I'm in the mood of working, and also in the mood of doing which kind of tasks. And at the end, my weekly investment into work will be the same as I would have a 9-to-5 job. So I think this anywhere, anytime work or education, it's already here. And of course, the human factor, as I highlighted earlier and we spoke, this is what we share in common to understand the human side of it. How does it affect our human system, our social interaction, etc. I think it's too early to see, because of course here we need also more self-control, kind of, because you need to have a certain level of, let's say, it's sometimes difficult, not easy for all the people to learn from home. It's same for me actually. I need this physical presence, and I think it will be hybrid. Maybe you go to school once a month for a weekend or something, and the rest is done online, etc. Or you can make choices or preferences how you wish to get your education. And what we also heard, my last kind of thing where I can see we are going, it's this life school. More, as we heard, a lot, I also have been learning, I've done a lot. It's not what I need in life or what I need as an entrepreneur. It's almost like, wow, I've done all this education and now I'm in life as an entrepreneur and I don't know anything. I mean, I know all the methodologies and I know all this theoretical stuff, but how does it actually work in life or as a business or as a founder? And especially on the human side, how can I resolve conflicts within my team or with my co-founders, etc. So I think education will go much, this 4.0 will go much more into a life school where I get fit. And this is also where it's linked to adaptability. We don't need to teach anyone about tools or methodology. It's more like, how are we able to cope with certain, also with the new pace of change, etc. So I'm super optimistic and interested to learn more about this human factor if we really put it in the middle also of the business purpose and the education purpose.
Absolutely.
That's
Brother, I'll add up my point here. The most successful businessman in India, the Reliance industry, we all know, is now the Fortune 50. The founder of that company was just 8th standard pass, right? And the topmost businessmen in India, these people are not highly educated guys, not at all. They are the people who have learned from the experience of life. My own chairman, who is a billionaire with $1.3 billion the revenue of the company, he is 6th pass, 6th standard. But he has been given a doctorate degree by the university, because they say you are a social engineer, you're a social guy, because you understand the nerve of the people. So this is where I think the education system of the future, machines can do a lot of work, which can be repetitive, but which doesn't require too much of mental power. What it requires is the human aspect and the learning of things, which is more about emotions, about people. And with COVID and people getting remote, the art of understanding people becomes even more difficult. It's not face-to-face as often as it used to be. So yes, I think education of today will shape up the future of the country, and it will shape up tomorrow. And I think that is somewhere Professor Arham and we all are equally passionate to see how we can make it happen. I will quickly move into the next section, which is now talking about the economic growth, because yes, we got talked about the foundation, and he said, we will, say, so Professor, I'll come to you again back to ask your opinion. So what do you think the Malaysian government and Malaysian education system should do to accelerate startup ecosystem? Because, the startup is something which will help the entrepreneur mindset about innovation ecosystem. Young generation gets a lot of opportunities of job. See, today the challenge is, be it India, be it mostly the Asian countries we talk about. The focus on innovation is less, and the focus on services or doing things that the established way is more. When we see the number of patents being filed, we see, be it Malaysia or be it India, and all those countries are way behind as compared to even the smallest of the country in Europe and US. So we want to just understand, how how Malaysia can come up to see this as a great opportunity and accelerate the innovation ecosystem there.
Okay, thanks a lot for the question. But before I go to the question, just like to add up, like Marcel mentioned just now, talking about IQ, EQ, and other kind of Q. So in Malaysia, when we plan the higher education blueprint, we also talking about SQ, spiritual intelligence. How we can make education, humanizing education, goes back to the basic. We need to have balance between ethics and also knowledge skill that we acquired. So I believe by combining this kind of two aspect of education, I believe we can prepare our graduates for the future. That's from my point of view. And thanks again, Alok, for the question. And I managed to look at some of the facts. One is Malaysia is ranked 12th among 190 economies in the ease of doing business. And according to the latest World Bank annual ratings, this is World Bank annual ratings, and the rank of Malaysia improved to 12 in 2019 from 15 in 2018. And based on this data, I believe Malaysia must have done something right there here. But COVID-19 coming in and everyone affected by it. But from my observation, Malaysia government and its education system has initiated many programs to accelerate startup ecosystem and building entrepreneur mindset among young generation of Malaysia. For example, I can pick up one or two examples. Talking about MAGIC, Malaysia Global Innovation and Creativity Center. So our government have initiated a lot of agencies and to support the ecosystem. And MAGIC discover and empowers technology startups and social innovators through creativity, innovation, technology adoption, and develop vibrant and sustainable entrepreneurship ecosystem in Malaysia. And it is an agency under the Ministry of Science and Technology. It navigates and enables the ecosystem with the mission of strengthening Malaysia's position as an emerging innovation nation. Even though Alok mentioned saying that in terms of the IP filing and so on, we are lacking behind, not that as far as the developed country, but we are moving towards that, right? And the mission to build a high economy and social impact. It's not only based on economy, but also on the social impact. And since its inception in, I believe, 2014, MAGIC have provide its community of startup investors, ecosystem players with the capacity building program, market funding opportunities, regulatory assistance. And based on my reading, it's about have impacted more than 100,000 aspiring and seasoned entrepreneurs with an overall value creation of 1.9 billion. So I believe it's part of the ecosystem that build entrepreneur mindset and also create the ecosystem for our entrepreneurs. Talking about funding aspect, when talking about entrepreneurs, need to talk about funding a little bit more. And we can look at another agency is called Cradle. Yeah? Cradle is an agency also under MOSTI that have a vision to preferred provider for early stage funding for our entrepreneurs. And the funding is in their website. They mention about Cradle Investment Program, CIP program, and it was established since 2003. And up until today, it has supported over 1,000 Malaysia technology-based company across multiple sectors and holds the highest conversion rate among funding agencies in the country. Even in our universities, we are looking towards Cradle kind of support to help our startup companies and spin-off company at our universities to kickstart as a seed fund. And not to forget, I believe you know MDEC, Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, a part of the ecosystem in Malaysia, which have a lot of initiative, especially on digital economy initiative that provide many initiative for digital startup companies. And that's all the agencies I'm looking at. For example, at UMK, I'm from UC Malaysia Kelantan. We are one of the government-funded university that was purposely set up in building entrepreneur mindset and to produce student entrepreneurs and graduate entrepreneurs, right? And based on the Tracer study by Ministry of Higher Education, in 2019, UMK ranked #1 among Malaysia university in producing graduate entrepreneurs at 13% compared to the national average for about 4 to 5% graduates that become entrepreneurs, right? So I believe it starts with changing or creating an entrepreneurial mindset among our young graduates. Most recently, as another example, in June 9th, 5 initiatives have been identified under National Technology Innovation Sandbox, or called NTIS, by our government. With the establishment of the NTIS, several regulations for pilots testing new technologies such as online sales delivery via drones, self-driving vehicles, have been introduced in line with the National Economy Recovery Plan announced by our Prime Minister, Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin. And the 5 initiatives included, for example, autonomous robot for health services for delivery as well as disinfection of spread of COVID-19 in government hospital and also teaching hospital. At our university, we have also a teaching hospital, as well as the agriculture sector by optimizing usage for fertilizers, spraying, pesticide, and so on. Another initiative on artificial intelligence and IoT on video analytics, smart manufacturing, using 3D printing. And one interesting thing on this sandbox is mutation breeding application by our agency Nuclear Malaysia, which create new paddy varieties with high value added that will contribute to food security, right? And with such high yield value and so on. So these are some of the latest development in Malaysia, talking about the innovation and also entrepreneurship ecosystem that the government, the universities is working towards that. And not to forget, as an example given just now, I believe Malaysia have good ecosystem in developing entrepreneurs, and I believe it's going to the right direction. Nevertheless, it is vital for Malaysian to be a larger and more connected community by activating academia, government, local entrepreneurs, talent, investors to help to lay a strong foundation on entrepreneurship ecosystem and industry that will drive growth in the future. And I believe this kind of networking is very crucial for us to expand. Thank you, Alam.
Perfect, perfect. So, because, I was doing my own research, being very closely associated to startup ecosystem. And we found that most of the startup companies, rather 100% of the startup companies start with a small company, right? And the biggest threat what they have is from the already established organizations who have a lot of money power, muscle power on the ground to threaten them indirectly when I say, and these poor guys, they're unable to get business. So even if government is helping them to establish, these guys cannot go on and get a business. So the initial business or a couple of years of business becomes so critical for their success. And that is why the failure rates were very, very high. So we have gone ahead, even put up a paper to Government of India telling, why can't you put it some kind of incentive to organizations, telling that if you buy from startup companies for that portion, you will not be taxed or something like that. At least there is a motivation for the organizations to give them that initial capital through the buying of their services or product, and then even the money coming from, the investors would also become much lesser. So that this kind of things, is something which is creating my next question. I'll come to Mr. Azmi, because when we talk about investment, companies are coming to Malaysia and investing. So economic growth is visualized with big buildings and large enterprises and a corporate ecosystem. This is the way we say. As soon as we say growth, we immediately visualize, big buildings. And I think Kuala Lumpur is synonymous with those big buildings, with Petronas Tower towering right in the center, right? However, it is seen that small businesses suffer under the muscle power of large companies, as I explained. And because of that, a section of society has a lot of buying power and a section doesn't have. Whereas a good and balanced regulation and society is a great attraction to global investors, just because it creates a huge consumption ecosystem in the society in a very balanced way, which doesn't go away if one company goes away. And this is where I want to understand, what Malaysian government or your organization or other organizations are doing to give that balanced growth to the country. There are the opportunities for everyone and a good balance between different sections of society.
I'd like to pick up from where Professor Arham was talking about. A number of agencies in Malaysia are there to facilitate startups, small, medium businesses. And this is clearly a good effort. Where we want to play a role is where when companies do their proof of concept or certain activities where they see that they can go to the next step, the go-to market or access to market, that is probably the next question, because putting money on the table for companies to run is probably something as a first step, and then probably something that of experimental as well. But the next phase of growth will be the most important part. We are taking this initiative simply because to attract investments in the larger scheme of things today is also to help to integrate companies into the ecosystem. We can loosely say talent ecosystem, as well as the small medium businesses ecosystem, including startups. And this is where we have seen that these activities can work, which we have facilitated before. From a Malaysia perspective, clearly COVID-19 is a wake-up call. We must continue to focus on our vision of shared prosperity, meaning it's going to be something across the country and not just Kuala Lumpur to benefit from that perspective. So those are important keys. When engaging and discussing with large companies, clearly they are all on the ESG goals, environmental, social, and government goals. And these are something that they are continually pursuing and fully aware of what they want to do and where they want to move ahead with regards to that. These activities and examples that we have seen from foreign MNCs bringing investments, as well as local multinationals, taking that proactive step to even identify which startup I want to work with. And this is quite a key and important aspect, simply because they take it upon themselves to work with a company that has probably some creative technology or creative idea, and how can they integrate that into their company, for example, to go and to take their experience forward. So these are the kind of examples that we have seen with regards to that. So clearly, it has to come in, and we need to meet in the middle with regards to where companies are coming from, startups, small, medium, and how can we bring them together with these MNCs with regards to what they can offer. The other important point is the US-China trade tension is very much alive. And this is where we have seen the supply chains have been disrupted all over the world. And the companies realizing that how can they better regionalize their supply chain, not even in terms of products, services, as well as how can they exchange information in a larger or in a smaller geographical ecosystem or coverage. So these are the things that we are seeing where companies are actively engaging and exploring across Southeast Asia about how can they connect better in Southeast Asia with regards to the access of markets, with regards to having a environment for them to prosper. And that's very important. And at the same time, ensuring that there is opportunity for other players to come in, not just about Southeast Asia, but players coming from India, from China, and Europeans bringing in their good ideas, and Americans bringing in their best practices and so on. And that's where we want to see where Southeast Asia can strike the balance across the region to have all these learning experiences as we move forward with regards to the development.
Absolutely. You know, I was under discussion with some of my friends once, and then they said, it was a long time back. You know, India is a very basic infrastructure. They don't have great airports, and that was many years back. All of a sudden, Indian government started building airports and building all this infrastructure. And then one finally say, you know, the best airports, probably Delhi is the best airport. You know, now what happens? Because of these global situations, the developed countries have spent years and years building infrastructure. And by the time it comes to a level, the developing nation can leapfrog and straight away come there, where other countries have taken years to reach. You know, that's the advantage probably COVID is putting in front of everyone. So it's a leapfrog time. And as you said that, you know, even because of this, you know, political scenario globally, there are opportunities which are getting opened in a way. And the world knows the Malacca Strait is being discussed more probably in the United States and China than in Malaysia itself, right? So we know that how important that place becomes and how important Malaysia can become in the global scenario. So, you know, moving to Elaine now, you know, Elaine, you have been in entrepreneurship, you know, and we have, you know, the professor and Azmi, both of them talking about what Malaysia they are doing. You know, can you suggest some best practices of startup and entrepreneurship ecosystem that Malaysia can adopt over and above what they already have, in case if they have, yes, I don't know, for the benefit of the people in the region, because you have access to the best global practices. I think both of you, Marcel and Elaine. So as an input and advice, what do you suggest?
Yeah, thank you, Uluk. I mentioned before we began the webinar that I've been fortunate enough to visit KL on a couple of occasions and seen what Cradle and Magic particularly are doing and the policies are putting in place there. So there's some very good work, and the recent Gen Global and Startup Genome report that was released in June this year is showing very much how, as a number of you saying, the future is Asian. You know, there is so much happening here that's moving forward. One of the things that we really recognize in our work in GEN across 170 plus countries is the importance of a very strong ecosystem and of all of those players interacting and communicating well together. You mentioned, Uluk, policies that government can put in that can support startups, whether it's, you know, in the supply chain, giving a tax break for a large organization who's using the services of a startup, I mean, those sorts of things are really worth exploring. What are the policies there? And I would put a plug in for what's being done to promote female entrepreneurship in the country. So much in all of our countries, so much opportunity and talent is not really taken most advantage of there. So policies particularly to support female entrepreneurs. Something that struck me, again, looking at the results of the Startup Genome report about Malaysia, is you're particularly strong in two sectors, fintech and the gaming sector. And gaming sector I find fascinating because that can be used in a wide variety of ways. There's a whole movement for games for good. And I remember reading a book about 4 or 5 years ago called How Games Will Change the World. And it's very interesting to see, you know, whether that's about building community, but gaming technology can be used in a number of different ways there. Back to sort of what we're learning from other ecosystems, policies is very strong. So ensuring that you've got policies in place that support. And Mr. Azimi was saying about one of the big issues is not so much a startup, it's the scale up. So how can you put policies in place to help those startups that get to a certain stage, and then it's about growth and it's about access to markets and different investment there. So really examining those policies there, and all the way along the line, measuring what's going on in your ecosystem internally, as well as sort of benchmarking. And the fortunate thing is that the Global Entrepreneurship Network, not just Jen, I'm talking about all of us who are working in this area anyway, is a very open and collaborative network. When COVID hit, there were so many initiatives for how can we get together? How can we get talent together to solve this issue? And that was very encouraging to see that so many talented minds from all different countries were coming together to put forward solutions for that. And hopefully we will see the results of that in the medical advances that are being developed at the moment. So policies, I would say, is the key thing. Looking at different visa access to different countries, breaks for, as you are doing, I know, InvestKL, you know, how can we encourage inward investment in the country? How can we encourage that talent? So you're doing a lot of good stuff, and I can't say that there's one thing that's missing in the piece there, but let's keep the collaboration going, and let's keep the international discussions going, because I think that's the mindset that we need to move forward.
So, you know, I just moved to Marcel now, and I have a couple of points which, you know, I wanted to share on this as well. But Marcel, you know, system, say Malaysia and this region.
I would pretty much agree with what Elaine said on policies and on scale up, because often we forget about these companies who are already on 1 million turnover, etc., and that the risk of failure is already very limited instead of building companies from scratch. And I've seen many governments or ecosystems focus too much on building from scratch, and it's really a waste of time and money in many cases. When it comes to Malaysia, I would say, for what I've seen on different ecosystems and out of my personal experience, create a playground. And you don't need to do much. The ecosystem it's almost when we used to be children. There is a playground, we have all the tools and support within that playground, but we don't need to overcomplicate things. Create a playground, and it can be simple as a building with support, of course, in terms of tools or facilitation methods, inputs, etc. But the magic will happen on itself. And for example, I told my parents always, they never supported me on one hand, but they always let me do, which was a great playground. And especially Asia for me was always this playground. I was living in Myanmar, Hong Kong. Within 2-4 hours, you have this massive, and it's much bigger of a marketplace than in Europe. And with ASEAN, you have the best already exchange with your neighboring countries. So I think already very much given optimistic for the future. Then the second thing is team. Team is crucial, and that's what Alok and I am very passionate about, building the right teams. And for that, there needs to be some support mechanisms, because I think the single most important issue for a founder is to have the team, the right co-founders, etc., right employees. And there is not enough done on this team aspect, understanding how you can support. And I would say for that, start with role models, with mentors, hero journeys. And in Switzerland, we have been discovering that we are too modest. Successful entrepreneurs don't share their story because it's not the Silicon Valley thing. The Silicon Valley is very outgoing. We share our stories, maybe a little bit too extreme, and the Swiss is too modest. So that it should be in between, because those founders or even scale-up companies need role models, mentor, and heroes. And so the mentoring part is I think one of the key element. And of course, it can be also done with a collaboration, private, public, government involvement, etc. Universities is very crucial as well there. For Malaysia, my last thing is also what I would, this food, it's massive. I was on a conference last year, there was this food track. And I think it's the biggest challenge in this decade, of course, because beside of pandemic and the other stuff, it's food. How can we feed, and food technology? Because, for example, in IT, beside of human, the most data on this planet is related with food logistics, supply chains, we heard earlier. So this is something where you can combine the resources or the abundant nature and possibilities in Malaysia. I've visited Borneo and other parts, Cameron Highlands, and also the health. I think these are particular two sectors where a lot of the time it's not paid that much of attention, and it can be linked with technology. Of course, it always is linked with the technology. So, and that's where I feel can be really USP of Malaysia, and also within the ASEAN area or countries.
Yeah, very, very valuable inputs. And I think Dr. Ram and Mr. Azmi both would take some notes out of it, because when we do that by talking to experts, we do that and say, okay, we suggest to our government to say, do that. But one thing I just wanted to point out here and add to this discussion. I was going through a paper which was written by some American experts, and that was many years back. And one thing which came out very strongly with that was that they said, in order to grow American economy, you don't need money. You basically need talent. So if you cannot produce talent, bring talent, import talent. And if you start importing talent, how do you do that? There were only two methods which were suggested. One was create universities which attract only the best. So create that ecosystem where you filter them out and bring only the best in. And when they pass out from those universities, give them a job, good job. And then that's how you build up the whole talent ecosystem. So you don't have to invest in their high school and everything. They are born somewhere, they are being brought up somewhere. But you just filter the best and bring them into your place. And the second one is, if you somehow missed some of those guys who have not been filtered, come out and attract those people who are already great and give them the best salary, best job, and bring them in. And this is what exactly they did decades after decades. And the whole ecosystem, if you see American startup, is Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley doesn't have many Americans. If you say they are mostly native, a lot of them are Indians, and most of them, if you say Europeans, some of them, Germans, Austrians, many of them. But the Native American people, when I say native, not even the so-called early red Indians, I'm talking about people who settled even 100 to 200 years back. They're very few. Most of them are actually selling pizzas there, right? So the people who are scientists and who are really, top notch, they have been imported. And then once they get imported, the government there adopts them and say, now you're American. They give them a passport and that is it. And so this continues. This became one of the biggest success factor, while most of the economies, including Russians and all of that, they kept themselves in the nationalist model and they say, no, we will not invite anyone. We will only develop it ourselves. And then the difference anyway is very obvious. So that's something which, I was going through the policy of Malaysia and I saw that, yes, it is very welcoming. They welcome, people from outside and the large workforce. I think you can even build qualitative aspect on top of it to really accelerate the whole thing. And that will be something which, in my opinion, would help the growth. So coming to the last section of this, discussion, I would, put question to Professor Arham very quickly. I've been very clearly telling that, 19th century was Europeans, 20th was American. I mean that 18th century was Europeans, 19th was American, and 20th will be Asian. It is not that it has happened for the first time. This is a cycle which keeps happening. So for this cycle, how much benefit can Asian countries bring in? So Professor, a question to you is like, I would like you to share your vision of an innovative Malaysia that closely works with global innovation ecosystem and becomes the model of the future innovation hub. Just your vision. Can you put on your speaker? It is, yeah.
Okay, thank you for the tough question because I'm not cannot predict in future, no? But the vision will be for innovative Malaysia. I believe it will start with the entrepreneurial mindset. When you have that entrepreneurial mindset, probably you will try to find solution for any particular problem, right? So now how we can create more youngsters with that entrepreneurial mindset, growth mindset. So that is my vision. If we can somehow integrate or synergize, I'm always call it a quadruple helix, which is academia working with industry, working with government towards the benefit of the community, right? So if we have that kind of formulation or framework and with an entrepreneurial mindset, toward the end of the days, we like to have our community benefited from whatever we do. And I think that is the future. And I believe, as you mentioned, Malaysia cannot work alone. We need to build the networks. Jen is a good kind of examples on our entrepreneur in Malaysia that can connect it to you and other networks. And we cannot work alone, never walk alone, like Liverpool, never walk alone. And I believe ASEAN is the future with the 600 million population, and based on this new pandemic that caused everyone a headache, but I believe there's always an opportunity there, and that works together. Thank you.
Perfect. So, I can articulate it. Yes, ASEAN is the future, and you don't only have 600 million. Let's add 130 more. So, not 130, 1,300 million, something like, it's a big number. India too, it's all, a commonplace. But yes, the focus is not working alone. It has to be together. And I think the world has to benefit. It is very, very interconnected world. And I think it cannot be taken away anymore. That time is lost. We are so interdependent, so interconnected. So thanks, Professor. The last question. So last question, I will put you to, Mr. Azmi. I would like you to share with us those practices that can benefit global companies if they choose to invest in Malaysia. How is Malaysia poised to lead economic recovery in ASEAN region especially with respect to employment and job creation. You can also throw light on any key challenges that Malaysia needs to address in doing that.
If it's not too controversial, I'll start by saying that gone are the days where government knows best. And this is important because in any activity that we do, we must connect and engage industry. And Marcel mentioned this clearly, PPP, public-private partnerships. And these are some of the activities that we've been doing clearly from 2011. We must continue to do that. Companies, locals, foreign multinationals, startups, and so on will all benefit from this kind of approach simply because it's about collaboration, it's about leveraging on each other and to achieve a certain objective in that sense. And we believe strongly in this kind of activities. And we are promoting that simply because it gives a benefit clearly to all the companies. For InvestKL specific, we are focusing on 3 key strategies from this post-COVID, which we call protect, retain, and attract. We must protect our investments today, continue to facilitate them. Yes, we are number 12 in the ease of doing business survey, but we can do a lot more better, perhaps in the red tapes, cutting bureaucracy, and so on. With protecting investments, then we can retain the investments, explore reinvestments, and most importantly, retain employment. And that's, I think, is a key because all around the world, all countries have introduced some form of stimulus package, short-term, medium-term, and so on. But what's next is where it is very important and critical. With protect and retain, this is where we can also display how we take care of our investors and for us to attract more investments in key areas that we are focusing on and in key areas where we are continuing with our journey of Industry 4.0 in terms of digital and analytics, in terms of all these activities where MNCs would be in a way the driver to all these activities. And let's face it, an MNC is as large as a country with regards to how they organize themselves and so on. And this is where we feel that these are some of the economic drivers that we will continue to focus on and continue to drive upon to ensure that the positive spillovers are to the society and the community with collaboration of public, government, and private as well to come together with regards to the offerings from a products and a services standpoint.
Perfect. So really nice, good insights from everyone. And, I have been just checking through the question and answer because that is the next session. We have little time. We don't have much time. So I just thought I will go through and try to pick up some, good questions. And it's open for everyone. But some are specific to Malaysia. Maybe I'll put one which is very specific to Malaysia, and probably Professor Ramstar Razmi, you can try answering that. One is, how important is reskilling and upskilling workforce post-COVID, and how is Malaysia planning to safeguard and recreate jobs through targeted upskilling and reskilling? So, would you like to take that up, Mr. Razmi or Professor, anyone?
Sure. This is where we have seen proactive steps with regards to the introduction of the medium and with the short-term and medium-term stimulus packages. During the control order, there were active engagements, both physical and through video conferencing, with industries. What are they expecting? What are they looking forward to? How can we introduce the better packages or stimulus incentives to ensure that jobs are there and to address also reskilling? So if you and these have all been introduced in stages and in phases. For example, just yesterday we launched our national apprentice scheme, and this is targeted at the youth, especially with vocational background, to see how we can ensure that they can get a good introduction and traction with also on-the-job training from companies, both local as well as foreign. So these are the kind of things that we are continuing to explore, continue to involve. Yes, a bit of reskilling as well as new skills that had to be picked up from that.
So thanks, Asmi. I have many questions, but I think I'll pick up one or two more because we have reached our deadline. However, since our viewers would also like to be satisfied. Some general question, I think I will put it to, say, Marcel. Do you think there would be a need to implement the universal basic income post-COVID? I think European economy is more related to that, Denmark and all of that, doling money. It is something like that.
I wanted to answer that question. You could feel that I was looking for that question. Because a few years ago, I would be clearly say no, there will be no universal basic income. Now I say there is no way around it. How we're going to do it, I don't know. And it's very specific for each country. But if we will not have a universal basic income in 10 years, I think as far 5 to 10 years from now in some countries, that the society as we know today wouldn't function anymore. Because as we hear with this industrial, with this automative revolution, a lot of especially low-skilled job will disappear, and a society could not function and could not allow itself to not have an income for those people. So for me, it's very clear. Otherwise, we really put our society as a whole at risk. So I think there is no way around it. How are we going to manage? Especially in Switzerland, there was the conversation, or in Finland, how much those people would get and how we're going to finance it. That's some question we have to solve. But that there will be basic income, I'm 100% convinced.
And if yes, then what does it mean for job seekers? Will job continue to exist, or is there any other way by which the money should be given?
You don't have to worry on the jobs. There will be always jobs. And you can see now already it has been, when there was the Industrial Revolution, there was a lot of people were worried about their job. We have had it in the past many times. And I step a little bit back from all these hypotheses about how many jobs will disappear, because on the same time there will be a lot of jobs created. So there will be always jobs. As mentioned earlier, it's a question how adaptable I am as a worker, because I think in future maybe you have a job for 2 years and it's more based on tasks, or so it's really the question how we perceive a job per se. It's not a 10, 20 years position, I think, in the future. It's more organic, more short term, I would say. But there will be always labor or labor requested.
So, to your answer, there was one very unusual thing which happened in India. Indian government said, we have enough jobs for everyone in the country. The problem is people don't want to do the jobs we want to offer. So the problem is the expectation of the people versus what is available. So that probably may be the answer. In Asian countries, people are more bothered about their image and brand and whatnot. Where I go to US, pilots, they go and deliver a pizza and then they become pilot back again when the economy goes better. So this kind of inhibitions, have to be let gone in case if the universal income has to come in. There was a case where a lot of migrant laborers went back to their native places in India, and the government gave them money, to basically dig holes, for trees. And they said, no, we will not dig it because we were doing manager job in the other city. How can I dig a hole? So sorry, that's not my business. And they were sitting, and they're like for 15, 20 days, there were no income for them. And they come back and they say, okay, I'm ready to dig that hole. So, it is a lot of that mindset change also will be needed before this universal income can actually be put in practice. Otherwise, probably we'll keep fighting. So maybe one last question I will put it from an anonymous attendee. Maybe anyone can answer. Maybe Elaine, you can answer if you can. Will the pandemic push knowledge work into gig economy?
I think we're already seeing that happen. I think that's already happening. So I think we'll certainly see an acceleration of that. And just like we were talking about now in terms of the nature of work and how people work has changed so much over the last sort of 20 odd years that, as Marcel said, you're not in a job for life now. You can expect to have a number of different jobs, and gig economy, you can expect to have a number of different roles in the gig economy. So I think it's happening. There'll be more of it, more acceleration for that. And that gives, I know there are a lot of downsides sometimes to the gig economy in terms of exploitation that needs to be, eradicated by the government. But there are, again, it's about flexibility, isn't it? And a lot of people like the flexibility that the gig economy gives to be able to work when they want to work and choose their hours there too. So there'll be more of it, yeah.
Yeah, I too feel that, typically gig is going to be the way, 100 years back, there were only 2% people who had fixed jobs. 98% of the people were doing gig. And that time, nobody knew gig as gig. It was just the way of life. So I think we are kind of traveling back, and so with that, I would bring an end to this the webinar. It was really a pleasure talking to all of you, Mr. Azmi, Professor Arham, Elaine, and Marcel. So thank you all so much for being part of this discussion. And I'm sure our viewers and the viewers of the future who will be watching our video will be immensely benefited from the insights which you all have shared. So thank you so much. And it was a great pleasure hosting all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.